Welcome to the Macon Atlanta podcast, where we're talking big questions, bold ideas, and better living with inspiring Atlantans. I'm your host, Brent Macon, and our guest today is Nick Fragnito, a founding partner at Shorewind Capital, which invests in early-stage frontier technologies. Nick founded 2 previous startups himself and was a senior associate for the family office of Mark Cuban. He's got an MBA from Emory, as well as a BS in Aerospace Engineering from Georgia Tech. This dude is way smarter than me, and he is also qualified for the Ironman World Championships and was a 4-time USA Triathlon All-American. Our conversation covers what it takes to be an elite triathlete, what it means to invest in technologies that don't exist yet, and more. He's also a father to a young girl. We talk about what it looks like to do all of this and still try to be a present and available dad. So thanks, Nick, for this conversation. Enjoy. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Nick Fragnito. Nick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you. What was today's workout?
Today was an easy swim.
Okay.
So 45 minutes, just kind of recover a little bit from the long weekend and back into it tomorrow.
Is Monday typically an easier recovery day? This is a Monday morning for anyone listening.
Usually, yeah.
Okay. And then what was the weekend?
The weekend, Saturday was a long bike ride, followed by a short run. So 4-hour ride and then a 20-minute run afterwards. So Sunday was an hour, 45-minute run, and then like a 45-minute strength session.
Okay. Got it. And so even when you're doing a 4-hour bike ride, even like a 20-minute run, are you always doing multiple modalities? Like, how does that?
That one, not always. It's useful to get the stimulus and used to the feeling of running after you've been doing a hard bike ride. It's just a little bit. I'm not sure if you've run off after a bike ride, but it's just a different sensation than normally running. Your legs kind of feel like jelly, and just getting used to that. Running on tired legs is good for the race.
Okay. And are you training for a specific race right now?
I am. Yeah, I'm training for the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii in October.
Okay. Got it. And how long is the training block for the Ironman World Championships?
We are now inside 20 weeks to the race. And so things are picking up quite a bit. So usually I would say for a regular non-World Championship Ironman, we like to do a 16-week build, which there are recovery weeks built into that as well.
Sure.
And for the World Championships, we're trying to do a little bit longer prep building into it.
Okay. Got it. And then a 4-hour bike ride. Where do you do a 4-hour bike ride in and around Atlanta?
I did it in my office.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As a function of having this neck surgery, I can't really turn my head. And so I thought it would be quite unsafe to ride on the road.
Okay. Got it.
But so I did that on my trainer, which is in my office right next to my treadmill. So I literally didn't go outside for 4.5 hours of working out on Saturday. And it was 97 degrees. So not a terrible choice.
Yeah.
But there's just rode my trainer, watch a lot of Netflix.
I was going to ask, on a 4-hour, are you watching? Are you listening? Are you consuming something?
Yeah. A little bit of everything. So Thursday, Friday, kind of building up to it. I knew I was going to have an indoor ride. So I just kind of queue up the YouTube videos, as my feed shows me ones that I would like, just kind of like open a new tab. And then I've got like 20 for Saturday morning that I can go through.
Okay.
Same thing with podcasts or other shows that I want to watch.
And like, how'd you get here? How'd you get into them? How did it start? And then how did it rise to this level when obviously you're competing at such a high level and giving so much of yourself to it?
Sure. Started in college. A couple roommates, we were interested in studying late for finals one night at the University of Georgia. And someone looked up triathlon, and we didn't think it was a real sport because it sounded crazy to do 3 things at one time. This was late at night studying for finals. And we said, okay, fine. Let's go swim in the morning. Let's go see if we can do it. And none of us could swim. So we recruited one of our, kind of fellow hallmates that was a high school swimmer. We all went to the pool when it opened at 5:30 and, tried to swim, and we didn't get very far.
Yeah.
And it kind of just built from there. So we trained that summer to do our first sprint race, sprint triathlon in Hiawassee, Georgia. And it was just like hanging out with a bunch of friends and doing something active every day. Was a runner in high school, and the first kind of 6 months of college didn't do a lot of running. And so it was a nice way to, like, we were all trying to get back in shape and do 5Ks and stuff. And this was a nice way to just stay active. We gained that freshman 15, which was very real. So we felt it was a way to feel healthy and have fun. And it kind of just built from there.
Yeah. What do you like about tri that running didn't necessarily do for you? Or what's better about triathlons than running?
That's a good question. I think I like the variety and changing it up in terms of just having more things to do and work on. I also think that I don't know, I feel like people tend to be drawn to things that they're good at. And I was a better cyclist than I was runner, even when I just started cycling. And so I think like that really drew me to it. And then also working on things that I just frankly wasn't good at, like swimming. And funny enough, I grew up as a runner, and now that's probably my weakest of the three sports.
Really? How did you get good at swimming? I was recovering from an ankle thing and went swimming, and it's like, oh, I am bad at this. I am not good at this. And to your point, I don't love things that I'm bad at. How did you like close the gap and get stronger than running?
I wish I had a answer for you there. It kind of just seems like some people pick it up quicker. And that's a non-answer. I'm trying not to brag. And I hope it doesn't come off.
Swim better. That's not, yeah.
Swimming is one of those sports where it's just so technique driven. I mean, you're a tall individual as well. So we tend to have an advantage as well. And so, if you can somehow, I almost feel like there's a luck factor to like who finds the technique. I had a number of great coaches along the way. And I swim at Dynamo up in Chambly. So there's a great master's program there. And they do like stroke video analysis and all that, which I did not do for like the first 7 years. But I think it was just like swimming is one of those things where you can really work really hard and then see results. And the difference in running is, you know, now that I'm in my, we'll call 34, early 30s.
It's mid 30s. Once they're 34, it's mid 30s.
35 has got to be mid 30s.
No, sorry. Early 30s caps at 33, mid 30s, 34 to 36, late 30s thereafter. Thought about it a lot. I'm pretty insistent here. Welcome, mid 30s. It's a good crew. It's happy to be here. Good to have you on the team.
Well, then you definitely know you can't run super hard all the time. So it's like you can do that in swimming, which is really nice. And it seems like that's been pretty beneficial.
I was going to ask, do you think triathlon is notably different and better on your body than sustained running?
I would think so, for sure. For example, if I was marathon training and I have trained for just one marathon, running mileage gets pretty high. Even if you're not trying to be super competitive, it can easily get into the 30s or 40s miles per week. And in triathlon, we're very rarely that high, even training for Ironman, which has a marathon in it. Most of our running weeks are low 20 miles. They will get up to 30 towards the end. So just in terms of the pounding, it's definitely lower. And cycling, there's actually just a study that came out recently. And I don't generally like studies that are like, this is a new study that changes everything we've ever known about cycling. But that it was actually... the more you cycle, the more you reduce the risk of arthritis in the knees. So I thought that was really interesting. And then swimming is one of those like kind of lifelong sports you can do for almost forever, as long as you can kind of move your arms and legs. Low impact, virtually no impact minus the walls. And you don't have to go fast, which is nice.
Yeah. I had breakfast with an 80-year-old who walked the Camino while I was doing an ultra marathon in April. And so we came back, and the Camino kind of religious pilgrimage. And then we came back and we were comparing notes. And this guy's 80. He's about to run his 48th Peachtree Road Race. He was a big squash player, and then his elbow gave out when he was 52. And so he started doing triathlons, then decided his goal was to do 100. And so between 52 and 73, he did 100 triathlons at sprint distance or Olympic distance. And I'm sitting there feeling pretty banged up from a 100K race. This guy's 80, about to do his 48th Peachtree Road Race this July. And he said he's run one half marathon ever and then never longer than 14 miles. And he's like, yeah, I just don't really feel like the body's meant to go that far. And I was like, oh man, like I want to be you when I'm 80. Like, am I doing all this wrong? How do you think about that? Like, how do you think about long-term impact, long-term wear and tear, balance on your body?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I wish, like, coming from like a research point of view, there was more data that showed like, hey, if you're doing these ultra endurance type events of running or running, biking, swimming, biking, running, that, this means X for the future. And it's so new. We don't really know yet. So I do have the opinion that I'm probably overdoing it in terms of longevity. And so I don't view trying to be super competitive at ultra races, to be like a long-term goal or strategy of mine. I'll ride a bike forever. I think like I'll always I just think that's super fun and like helps ground me as a person. It's a good outlet, just to be out in nature. But in terms of longevity, I think, strength is probably where I'm going to try to go next and, spend a lot more time just building muscle, building flexibility, really functional strength. And just really with the lens of, later in life, I want to be able to pick up my grandchildren and hopefully great grandchildren.
Good plug for the longevity conversation we're having later. Picking up your great grandkids. That's a good squad goal.
Yeah. And so what does that really look like? That's like a goblet squat, bending down and kind of picking them up. And so like want to be able to do that when I'm hopefully 90 or later, if my children decide to have their children. So that means having a lot of strength now. And then slowly losing that over time. But yeah, so long-term goal for me is I always want to probably ride my bike. I don't know if I'll always run. I do love it. It's very freeing and you can just run out the door in a pair of shoes and shorts and that's it. So you don't need a lot of gear.
How have you found the right distance level and intensity level for you? Like, obviously you started with a sprint triathlon. Now you're doing an Ironman. Mm-hmm. Did you experiment with different distances? Like, when did you feel like water found its level in terms of what you were going to go after and why? Yeah.
So to be honest, I gravitated towards like which ones had the best competition in terms of other people racing. So
measured by
just size of the field and the number of kind of people at the top end. So sprint and Olympic distance are great. I think like Olympic distance is probably my favorite distance.
What's Olympic distance?
So that would be like a 1,500 meter swim, 40 kilometer bike ride, and then a 10K run.
Cool.
I think that distance is great. That's the distance that they do in the Olympics. It was my second race ever was an Olympic distance race. And, they're super fun. You can train for them. You don't have to be super intense about it.
For anyone listening, what's like a really good Olympic triathlon time? And then what's like, an average amateur time?
Sure. I think a great average time is around 2.5 hours.
Okay. So you're really biting something off, but it's not, you're not mortgaging your life to train for this thing.
Right. And then the best part is afterwards, you're not destroyed for the whole day. Totally. You're going to be very tired, obviously. But you can go be a dad or whatever you got to do the rest of the day, which is really nice compared to some of the longer races. But yeah, I really gravitated towards, backing up a second, the sprint and Olympic distance races are great. They tend to be a little bit more local. So people don't travel as much to them. And so the fields just are a little bit smaller meaning maybe 100, 200 people. And then when you start getting into these half Ironman, and Ironman is a brand. And so like the distance is kind of synonymous with the brand at this point. But that distance would be a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike ride, and then a 13.1 mile run afterwards. Those branded races tend to be pretty big. Fields in the 2,000 to 3,000 person size. And so you tend to get a lot of competitors there trying to do really well in their age group or win overall. There's also a professional division, which I do not do. It was just more fun to race more people. And I kind of gravitated towards those. The difference there is they're longer races, harder on your body. And so you can do fewer of them. So I tend to train a lot more and race less.
Yeah. How many races in like a given year, or like, do you think about the season in terms of a year, or like how's it structured?
Yeah, I do think about the season that way. This year's been a little bit different with the World Championships, but usually it's maybe 3 to 4 races a year total.
Okay. Did you have to you qualified for the World Championships, I assume?
I did, yeah.
Got it. How was that process?
It was really hard. I thought I was going to qualify at my first Ironman, and that was a very naive thought. That was back in 2013 in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Training had been going great. I had a coach, and she thought I was going to have a great race. But an Ironman's it's a long distance. It's a long day. And being new to it, you don't know what you don't know. And so I found out the hard way that it's going to take a long time to qualify.
Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Like where were the walls that you hit, and what did that feel like?
Sure. Yeah. So the big walls were for me nutrition. It's such a long race. You have to eat during it. And by long race, for that race took me 11 hours and 3 minutes. So, you're not stopping for lunch along the way. And so you try to eat during the race. And I just didn't know exactly what to do or how to do it. I remember, so this was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's absolutely beautiful up there. Wasn't super hot. So like for me, a bigger guy, like cool weather is great for a long race. But I remember I'd never felt my body that way before. I felt like kind of like an out of body experience where I couldn't control my arms or my legs. And so I remember being on the run, and it's on this path along this beautiful lake, Lake Coeur d'Alene, in Idaho. And I just remember seeing salt tablets on the ground and picking them up and taking them every 20 to 30 minutes. So people were obviously dropping them and losing them. I don't know if they came from their mouth or where they came from, and
you were like, yes, send that right on.
I was like,
through.
I need it all. Yeah. And I made it to the finish line. And that was a big learning experience. And I knew, I wasn't going to do another one for a while. One, it's an expensive sport and I was still in college. Two, I just wanted to like be more prepared, and I thought that would take a long time. So I was pretty mindful about how and when to do the next one.
Yeah. What was it? So obviously you finished, you had a tough time. Mm-hmm. What was it about it that you were like, oh, but I'm getting back on this horse. Like, this is clearly for me. Like what resonates?
I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine yesterday about that. Like, he had done the World Championships in Hawaii beforehand, and he was talking about how hot it was, how humid it was, how miserable he had at the time. I was like, man, why are we going back? Like, why am I doing this with you too? And he was like, because I can do better. And really that is exactly my answer too. It was just like, I knew the process that I executed to go into the race. And I knew what outcome that led to. And so I knew I could tweak a bunch of things and hopefully that would change the outcome. And so I kind of view it the way I view everything in my life, for better or worse, as like just always trying to get better. It's like really nice to have like triathlon or any probably fitness endeavor where you can set up, change your week, and then maybe you run a little bit faster the next week. And so building that out to a full race was really interesting to me. And there were so many things to work on. Like, you could work on how you swim. You could work on the gear on the bike. You go a little bit faster just by buying certain things or inventing things. And then the nutrition was really interesting to me. And I also had a coach that, for whatever reason, she saw potential, and we wanted to just keep going. It was also fun. We were there with a lot of friends, lifelong friends that I met that weekend. And
you've kept in touch with folks that you met at the 2013 Ironman? I have, yeah.
Okay. We actually live a couple of blocks from each other now.
Okay. Wow.
Different friends that I was just mentioning, but yeah. So it was a very meaningful race.
Yeah, totally. And when does an Ironman athlete, like, when's the peak average in terms of like age? Like, are you in our mid 30s as we sit here having this conversation? Are you past the peak, or is it a little bit later, like some of the distance running stuff?
It's an interesting question, because historically it had been like late 30s was a peak. So 38 and 39.
Late 30s. Thank you. Kipchoge, he's late 30s.
Exactly. So that like, historically, the longer distances, people tended to peak in their late 30s. That's changing. Whether that's new research on nutrition or equipment or training technique, or maybe people are just going longer distances earlier in their athletic careers now. It seems to be like late 20s is the people are really winning races in their late 20s now, which is new. That's really new.
It never really, like my dad has always said, my dad has run a number of marathons and he's always said, until your mid 30s, I would recommend trying to run fast. And then you can think about running far if you want to, because you're going to peak late 30s. And I was like, why? No one else in their athletic career peaks in the late 30s. And so I've never really quite understood it, but I was just kind of taking it at face value. And so it seems like it's shifting in the triathlon world.
It seems like it a little bit. I also hold the same logic that it sounds like your dad does, which is, and even in my mid 30s now, like running fast, something's going to hurt the next day. You might tweak a calf, you never know. So it's just harder on the body, but I can go long, a little bit slower for a lot longer. But it does seem to be changing. There's also like the notion, just using triathlon as a starting point, like people start, the youth, like the youth pathway, if you're an elite, is usually sprint distance. And then when you kind of get to 18 to 21, you start doing the Olympic distance. And then those people, tend to try to qualify for the Olympics. They would also specialize in that distance. And then maybe when they retired in their late 20s or early 30s, they would kind of start doing longer distance. So half Ironman or Ironman races. And now you're starting to see people go back and forth. So maybe go from an Olympic distance race to a half Ironman or Ironman, and then back down to the Olympics, Olympic distance. And so, that's changing too. It is harder though. It's much easier to go long than it is to go short once you've kind of been doing a longer distance race.
Yeah. And how are you thinking about your peak? And then, if the goal and the animating factor has been, I'm going to keep getting better, there's going to be a day when that's no longer true. What do you anticipate sustaining you at that point? Like, how are you feel like you're oriented towards that feeling? Have you thought about it much?
I've thought about it a lot. And I kind of view it in two ways. One, I view it as my triathlon peak. And then one, I view as my athletic peak. Because every year since high school, I ran in high school, was a track and cross country runner in high school. Played other sports as well, but those were my main sports. And I was not very good cross country runner. Ran JV, even as a senior. My coach let me run varsity in the last race because she just saw me as a leader and wanted me to kind of have that experience with the team. But I was not very fast. I was a good track runner, 800 and 1600 meter running. So every year since then, I've gotten faster every single year. There were even years where I had hip surgeries that I was telling you about. That year, I still got faster. And so that will stop at some point. So I kind of view my full athletic careers, I want to PR in something every year forever. Now, strategically, I'm saving certain things for certain times when I know it's going to be harder to set a new personal record in something. So what does that mean? That means when I go to the gym and I'm doing deadlifts, I'm purposefully not lifting as much as I can, never maxing out, because I want to save that for when I need it. I need a PR that year. So I'm kind of viewing these things individually.
How far out do you have this charted? Like, do you know what you're going to PR in when you're 55?
I don't. I haven't built it out that detailed, I guess. It's more of like just a life goal and philosophy that I have. I don't know what the 80-year-old PR is going to be yet. Sure. Maybe that's in bad or something.
I can't wait to find out. I hope we're still talking then.
I might have to make a list. Yeah. So that's kind of more fun that I've just I noticed that. In triathlon, this could be my peak this year.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is a lot of things. One, to get faster now for me is it requires a lot of volume. So increasing the amount of time that I'm training every week, and that needs to be consistent. So if I'm doing in an average week, when I'm not training for an Ironman, might be 10 to 12 hours. So that's like, maybe an hour a day during the week, and then a longer bike ride on the weekend kind of thing. And that's kind of a normal training week for me. For building for Ironman, last week was 16 hours. And that needs to be consistent. So
the aggregate load being intense in the season and probably unsustainable from a time perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Very unsustainable. But I have like a finish line in mind, which is end of October at the World Championships. So I'm kind of just like going to limp there, in terms of just making sure I get all the time in. So last week was 16 hours. We're going to try to stay there and build, as like the rest of this 20-week block kind of, progresses. That'll probably have several peak weeks in there where we do like a training camp. That'll be, we'll go somewhere, probably, North Georgia, is a great place to do it. And those will be in the, 20 to 24 hour range. We won't do many of those just from a lifestyle standpoint. It's not sustainable. Yeah. Trying to run a business over here, and also have a wife and daughter. And
that's going to be my next question. It is my next question. How's that going as a dad?
It's the training aspect with as being dad.
Not overall fatherhood, but you can tell me that too.
It's definitely a hard balance. Because as any second that you're not there is a second you can never get back. Yeah. And so I don't take that lightly at all. So
how have y'all made it work?
So our daughter sleeps on average until about 6:30 in the morning. Yeah. So as an example, this morning I was done with my swim and back home by 6:30, so I could be there when she wakes up. And that's my only workout today. So Mondays are really easy. Tuesdays, usually that looks like a bike ride followed by a short run, and then maybe something in the afternoon. So I'll try to do the first while she's asleep, and then be with her when she wakes up or shortly after. My wife will then do a workout, and then we'll take our daughter to daycare, and then I'll work. And a lot of times people cancel meetings. I love that. That's a time to get a quick bike ride in. Otherwise, I'll do it when she goes to sleep.
Okay, got it. So you're like burning the candle at both ends to get the training in around parenting.
Yeah.
What do you perceive as the opportunity cost in life overall from giving this much both time and then kind of energy investment into an outlet like triathlon?
It's a really good question. I think about it a lot, to be honest. But I also think about it I think about it in a number of ways. One is that triathlon has given me everything. Gave me my wife. We met in triathlon club in college. Huh. I was at Georgia Tech and she was at the University of Georgia. And we met through mutual friends because we were both in triathlon clubs. So it gave me my wife. It gave me my job. It's a long, circuitous path to get there, but I view it as it gave me my job.
I'll bring that up.
Okay. Yeah. And it gives me balance throughout the day. So it's like, if I didn't kind of train every morning, maybe that's an extra hour of sleep. But that's an extra hour that my mind is not, it doesn't have a chance to kind of breathe. And I wouldn't have that outlet. So I kind of view it as a way to clear my mind before going into work as well. And parenthood in the morning too. So I view it that way. I view it as a way to kind of be creative as well. My job, there's a certain element of creativity. It is adjacent to finance, so you don't want to be too creative with the numbers, but I view that as like an outlet for a number of different things. So yeah.
Yeah. And what is, like, at the deepest level, like the why that you feel like, what really animates you and makes you feel like, okay, giving this much of myself to this pursuit towards getting better every year and seeing how fast I can go and seeing if I can, tap into the next thing. Like, what is it about that feeds you?
It always shows me that there's more. And so, a metaphor I like to think about is when I'm at work and feel like I'm really grinding and working a lot. I just can think about to a race like, wow, like I thought my back was against the wall at mile 24 of a marathon and an Ironman, but like I found a way to dig deep and make it to the finish line, or even go faster than I thought I could in getting to that finish line. And so then when I'm at work, nothing seems hard. And so I like to continually push myself because I know that there's always more that I can be doing. And it's not trying to do more work for the sake of doing work, but it's trying to like maximize the time I have and be efficient. But that there's like almost no bound to how I can do that.
And over the course of the Ironman, like what are the seasons of psychology within a race? Like, do you have a consistent, like, okay, I know going in mile 10 of the run is going to be where it's like, I got to steel myself. Are you coasting to a certain point and then grinding? Like, how do you think about the layout of this time as you're approaching the World Championships?
Not everyone has a perfect race in their lifetime. I never thought I would. But what I mean by that is, not everything went perfectly, but my mindset was almost perfect the whole day. And leading up to that, we had done a ton of visualization and just preparing for the inevitable, which maybe
we is you and a coach?
Me and a coach.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're putting you through visualization exercises about the race?
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So it kind of starts a couple weeks out, when your training's starting to come down a little bit, you're getting ready to taper for the race. And so you have a little extra time. And it's a great time to start kind of practicing. And
what does that look like? Really curious how that goes.
Sure. Starting with, the day before the race, kind of in your mind, thinking through like everything you need to do. There's anyone that's done, a race of any kind knows that there's, just kind of a checklist of things you got to do the day before. You got to eat the right stuff. You got to make sure you have your gear. Usually there's travel involved. And if you're traveling with family or loved ones, there's a lot of coordination. And so just thinking about all those things ahead of time, and thinking about the order of them, how you want them to go, but then also what could go wrong. And that's really the important part, is expecting things to go wrong so that when they do, you're kind of prepared and you don't get too flustered. And then we would do that through the race day as well. So kind of wake up, a few hours before the race starts, kind of do your breakfast. And
you're picturing all this.
We're picturing all of this.
And like, are they leading you, like, are you like legs crossed guided meditation style? Is this like a 10-minute thing? Is this like an hour long meditation? Like, how's this working?
It's usually a walk.
Okay.
Yeah. So going for a walk, and just, trying to be outside. So there's not too many distractions. And just by myself, just thinking through everything. Okay. Usually 30 minutes.
So they've kind of given you a homework assignment on go for this and visualize it and kind of go through that checklist manifesto almost like exactly on your own. Mm-hmm. Okay. Super interesting.
And so then, right up to the start of the race, thinking through everything that could happen and go wrong. Like maybe I forget my goggles. Like, what am I going to do before the swim start? And then you think through the bike and like, okay, imagine a flat tire. How are you going to change it? Do you know where all the tools are that you need to change it, which are stored on the bike? And, that kind of prompts you like, oh, maybe I should go make sure that CO2 and that tube are still in good condition for the race. And so it kind of just helps prepare for the race. And then thinking through the run and you should expect to be uncomfortable, whether that's just from the exertion of the race, or maybe it's really hot, or maybe you haven't seen family in a while, which is a huge help on the course, just, seeing loved ones. And then thinking through the finish line and what it's going to feel like at the end. And so you really not just thinking about these things, but you're trying to feel them. And like, what does the disappointment of a flat tire feel like? Because you train so hard for, 16 weeks. And then like one flat tire that could really ruin your race. So that's kind of how we prepare for it that way.
And do you do similar exercises in other areas of life? Like similar visualization?
No, but I should probably. We probably all should. It's very useful. As an example, in that race in Ironman Tulsa, at mile 100, I got a mechanical issue on the bike. So there was something wrong with my derailleur. So, I had to get off my bike. I was on a very steep hill as well. And get off my bike, try to fix it. And I just remember feeling nothing in that moment. I wasn't upset. I wasn't like mad. I was losing minutes on the side of the road. It was just very mechanical in my mind of like, this is what we got to do. We're doing it. We expected this to happen. It's happening. Let's just get on with it.
Strikes me as kind of a stoic philosophy approach towards it. Like, obviously this is a thing that can happen and it can either fluster you or you can just deal with it and keep going.
Yeah. And I hadn't discovered stoicism at the time, but you're totally right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. The applicability, of what you were mentioning around taking the same things that require excellence in a race, diligent prep, following a plan, charting something hard, persevering, and then also things like the headspace and knowing that it's going to be creativity, space for you to process and otherwise, and then like applying those to life. I think that's the other real benefit that I feel from a training program is it just like puts me on the wavelength of being a rigorous person in all things. And I feel like that has cascading benefits in terms of how I show up elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of feel like I'm about it when I'm following a training plan. Maybe it doesn't have to be like extreme or long. And I'm kind of thinking about that around what is the time trade-off that I'm making. But that definitely, I perceive that to be some of the benefit.
I would agree 100%. And I also feel like when I'm in the training plan, you can feel that percolation to other areas of life, like very clearly, more so than when you're not in the training plan. Like, just as an example, like being very diligent about everything, trying to watch nutrition and everything like that. I don't do that unless I'm like really working for a race. But when that's happening, you kind of notice things at work are a little bit more fluid. They're a little bit more structured. There's more purpose to everything that I'm doing. And it's just, to your point, it just feels a little bit more purposeful.
Yeah. I want to talk about a couple other things too. And thank you. I know that we could go deep on tries, and thanks for indulging that.
Of course.
You mentioned inventing a gear for your bike or inventing something to make your bike go faster, which I imagine is not something that everyone is thinking about who's doing triathlons, like what they can invent for your bike. And then triathlons, like giving you your job. Can you talk about both of those things and like how you got started on the path to investing out of triathlons?
Sure. Yeah. The inventing a gear for my bike got me the job. So triathlon, yeah, it's all very kind of in the line there. So we were in college, and for folks not familiar with cycling, there's this thing called a disc wheel, which is most of the time it's on the back wheel of the bike, but it's a completely solid wheel. There's no spokes, and it's aerodynamically faster. That's pretty common knowledge, and we knew that when we were in college and just starting to race. But we were in college, we couldn't afford them. They're fairly expensive. And so I decided I wanted to make one. And only had a few dollars to do that. So it cost me $7 actually. I called up a plastic supply company and ordered some high impact styrene, which is just a pretty durable plastic that you can cut very easily and mold. And so made my own disc wheel.
How much do they usually cost?
Like $2,000 to $3,000.
And you made it for $7?
Made it for $7, yeah.
Okay. How did you cut it and manipulate it, at risk of a dumb question?
No. It's actually a hard problem to solve because a wheel, like with the spokes. So basically I was using this plastic to put over the spokes to make it more aerodynamic. And the spokes aren't flat the way they are. It's kind of like conical or I forget the exact word for it. But so what we would do is you got to figure out like how to make that shape out of plastic. So we start with a circle, and then we had to essentially cut a pizza slice out. But we were using very basic math to figure out like what size that pizza slice should be to make the height of the cone correct. And then glued that into place. And then I painted it afterwards too. I painted it as a Pokeball. And I wrote, "Gotta catch them all." So it was like red and white. And then on the bottom said, "Gotta catch them all." And I did that because one, I loved that game growing up. And two, I was a poor swimmer at the time, but I was a good cyclist. So I would catch everybody on the bike. Nice. And funny enough, Triathlete magazine took a picture of me in a race with that and put it like in their magazine, which was super fun. Nice. And so that was the first thing I invented, was just a disc cover. Was not a novel invention. We just found a way to do it super cheap.
And were you at Georgia or Georgia Tech when this is happening?
That was at Georgia.
Okay.
And just for context, I transferred to Georgia Tech after my third year.
Okay.
And that was because of cycling, to study aerospace engineering.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Can you unpack that?
Sure. So was at the University of Georgia. and always thought I was going to be an engineer because everyone in my family was an engineer. I thought I was an engineer growing up, but I didn't think I needed a piece of paper to tell me that. But it turns out you do. If you want to work as an engineer, you need to have an engineering degree. And the University of Georgia, they didn't have the College of Engineering at the time. They did. It was like agricultural engineering, biochemical engineering, but they didn't have mechanical or anything like that. So I knew that if I wanted to study engineering, I needed to transfer. And I was doing research at the time in the physics department, and we were studying nanomotors, basically these 4-micron silicon balls that we would deposit material onto, and then place them in different solutions and they could move. And the dominant force at that very small level is hydrodynamic forces. And just loved that. That was like, oh wow, I'm like just getting into cycling. I'm seeing this like in the lab. It's so cool. And like, what would that look like as a career? And took me to aerospace engineering, and had to go to Georgia Tech for that. Luckily, it wasn't too far.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. And so you start building at Georgia. You want to work in cycling. So you're studying aerospace engineering. What was the consideration set at that point, and what did you end up doing?
So I ended up working in cycling. I applied for an internship. So there was this guy in Des Moines, Iowa. He was a professional triathlete. His name was TJ Tollickson. He started this company called Diamond Bikes, and they were making a new kind of radical bike frame. And I found his email address in the magazine and just emailed him and asked for an internship. Told him what I was doing at Georgia Tech and told him about the products that I had been making. And I got the job. There was more interviews, obviously, but
sure. Pretty awesome email to get if you're that guy.
It was awesome to email him.
Yeah,
I thought that was the
kind of a perfect fit.
Yeah. So that summer I went to Des Moines, Iowa, and worked in cycling. And I was kind of a do everything engineer there. So we were building rigs to build different parts of the frame, tools, setups for the shop, working on the frame in CAD. And then we got the first prototypes that summer, and it was awesome. It was really like I couldn't have asked for a better internship experience because it was very much a startup. So that was my first experience. I didn't even know what a startup was when I went there, really. So learned a ton that summer. But why I say triathlon gave me my career is triathlon led me to that job. And there I met the co-founder of my first company. So we'd kind of stayed in touch after that internship, and we were building products on the side. We were both kind of just inventors and tinkerers and had been building cool stuff that summer outside of the bike. And went back to school after that and finished up school.
Got it. And what was that first company?
That company was called Mind Talk. And we built bone conducting mouth guards for athletes in contact sports that would vibrate their teeth and then they could hear that way. So that was something we invented a prototype of that summer at Diamond Bikes.
Okay. So you're working on bikes and then building mouth guards on the side?
Yeah. It was, that makes it sound more glamorous. We were kind of just tinkering around in like a garage, but yeah.
Okay.
We had this, Rob was my co-founder's name, and it was his idea. He had this toothbrush. It was called Tooth Tunes. When you would brush your teeth, it would play music and you would hear it, but like you couldn't really hear anything. It was like only when you were brushing your teeth. So we were like, we both had played football briefly in high school, and hey, could we put this in a mouth guard? Like, could we listen to music while we're playing football? This was like pre-AirPods. So you couldn't have headphones in your helmet. And so we're like, hey, that could be pretty cool. And it morphed into something much bigger than that, but that's how we started.
Got it.
Yeah.
And can you run us through, and then we'll double click in a few places, but just your path from running companies to investing and what that's looked like in Atlanta and out of Atlanta?
Sure. Yeah. That's a big question.
Yeah. Feel free to take it in whatever order you want.
Yeah, sure. We started the company Mind Talk, and Rob was living in Iowa. He was from Iowa, actually. And I was here in Atlanta. This was about a year after I graduated from Georgia Tech, and I had been working in consulting here. And so at night we would talk and we would think through like the business and the product and how can we really do this? And we built a pitch deck, which Neither one of us had really seen a startup pitch deck before, but we knew we needed to make one. And so we did. And just started talking to local investors, him in Iowa, and there were significantly fewer than there were in Atlanta. And this was 2013. And so we were raising money to try to build an actual prototype. We'd kind of made our own. It worked. It was not something you'd actually wear if you were a football player. And so we needed money to really go build that and hire a team to help us. And so we started talking to angel investors. And it was pretty clear very quickly that trying to build a consumer hardware product in Atlanta was going to be very challenging.
Why?
Atlanta just tends to have more software investors. Software is maybe call it lower risk type of business to build, and not as much. There also haven't been that many Atlanta success stories in hardware, and that's probably fuels it a little bit as well. So we knew that, and just after trial and error, and then we were kind of invited to a pitch competition in Dallas, Texas. And for those not familiar, Texas has a huge hardware ecosystem. So Texas Instruments, Dallas has a huge hardware ecosystem. Texas Instruments is headquartered there. There's been a number of spin-offs from that. So there's Freescale. So all of these are kind of these hardware companies that are in and around Texas. There's a lot of kind of just executives that are interested in angel investing out there. You have Dell in Austin, and there's a lot of overlap between those cities. So that was kind of the context going in, and we knew that. And we won the pitch competition. We got a check that day. They invited us to join their accelerator, which we did, and then met lots of other angel investors whom invested. And it was just a very different experience than Atlanta. And after that first week, we were out there just for a few days to kind of like do the pitch competition and meet some people. And we were like, okay, we got to move to Dallas. So quit my job and drove to Texas.
Got it. And when in that process did you decide that you wanted to move from operating and running startups to investing, and why?
The first meeting I ever had with an angel investor, that's when I knew.
Really? So like before you've even gotten, before this pitch competition?
Before the pitch
you
competition.
You knew I already want to be an investor.
I already want to be an investor. It was really the first angel investor meeting I ever had. I knew I needed to get to the other side of the table. And the reason was I could help build more cool things as an investor than just focusing on one as an entrepreneur. That was really the answer. So I just had to figure out, like, I'm obviously going to see mine talk through, and we wanted to build a massive business. But that was like the ultimate goal. Like, how do I end up as an investor?
Got it. And how long from that initial meeting until you were professionally an investor?
It depends how we define professional investor. I think as like starting our own fund, that was 2021. So that would be about 8 years.
Okay. But you worked in the investing space prior. How long between the first meeting and then like when your job was investing or contributing towards?
I guess maybe 3 years.
Okay.
3 years.
Did that feel right? Did you feel like, oh, I'm not doing what I want to be doing for all these 3 years, or like an investment that you knew you were making and it was going to be there on the back end? Like, how was that process?
I didn't have a real plan, to be honest. I was just trying to take advantage of meeting people in a world that I knew nothing about, and learn as much as I could. Yeah. And that really started just as a founder. Like I knew I wanted to be an investor, but I didn't change anything I was doing. Like I didn't try to go learn more about investing or anything like that. It was more like mental note, that's what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life.
Yeah. I was trying to think about, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I may not be in the exact career field or role that I maybe want to be in long term, but if it's 3 or 5 years away, is that like wasted time? Is there something I should be doing now? Like curious, like how you navigated that. Sounds like you were just heads down building.
I was heads down building, but I think I was in the fortunate position of it's a well-trodden path to go from founder to investor. And so mine were very adjacent to each other. I could see if that was like completely career switching, which I did. That is a career switch. But if it was something a little bit more, I guess farther away, it could be harder for sure. But no, I viewed everything I was doing as like, when I'm an investor, assuming I get there, like I'm going to want to look for certain qualities in founders. And so I should know firsthand what those look and feel like. And so I was trying to like be the best founder that I could.
What are those qualities that you look for?
To be honest, I look for athletes a lot of times. I'm not going to not talk to someone if they're not an athlete, but I just like, if you have that grit, determination, and tenacity, like that helps answer a lot of my questions up front. And so it's just a helpful selection mechanism. We have a number of great founders. Actually, I think almost all of our founders are non-athletes. Okay. So,
so I look for them.
I haven't found them yet. But yeah, so that's very helpful.
Okay. Got it. Sorry, I keep cutting you off as you're talking about this journey.
All good.
How did education fit in that?
Yeah. So I was a classically trained engineer that tried to become a founder. And I had some time in consulting, I mentioned, where I learned a bunch of different skills like that were very helpful. Just frankly, how to send an email and how to make an ask and those types of things.
Yeah, totally. I started as consulting and I love telling this story. Larissa Quinn, if you're listening and out there, my first manager was like reading all my emails before I sent them. And on the one hand, it like just feels like, so you're like, come on. But then I look back and I'm like, oh no, I really needed that help, like to become a professional, like how to word and send an email and not make it 3 paragraphs long, but it could be 3 sentences long. So like really does happen.
Yep. Actually, that's a funny story. I remember a time where my manager was reading my emails as well. And a supplier was late on giving us a quote for something. And I was like, hey, I want to like ask him what's up. And he's like, okay, great. Send me the note beforehand. So I typed up this email that was like, hey, like you said, you were going to do this at this time. We're past this time. Like, where is it? What's going on? And he was like, do not send that email. Yeah. This is terrible. You cannot talk to people that way. So yeah, glad I had those experiences before trying to email investors and things like that. Yeah,
totally. So consulting, you learn a number of things in consulting, and then still you're a classically trained engineer.
Yep.
Trying to run in business circles at this point.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to end up as an investor. Even so, Mind Talk, that company, we didn't get very far. We ran into a lot of issues around IP. A lot of hearing aid companies owned the patents around bone conduction in your mouth. And so we just kept hitting roadblock after roadblock, and ultimately shut the business down after about 18 months. I had an opportunity to start another business. That one went a lot better. And that's the one that led me to the investing role. But even when I had that investing role, which I'll back up. My second company was Radical Transport. I started that company with Mark Cuban, and we were building the balancing algorithm beneath self-balancing vehicles. We had our own hardware device called the Radical Move. It was like a hoverboard, if you're familiar with those. We had our own technology around that. We ran that business for a few years, and then I joined the venture side of Mark's family office. So that was my first investing role.
Got it. Where was the genesis of that idea, and like how did you all get plugged in, and how did you go from, a first company that didn't make it to where you originally wanted it to that second shot on goal with somebody like Mark Cuban on your side?
Sure. Yeah. So with Mind Talk, somebody in our startup class at that accelerator emailed Mark, and we were in Dallas, and he's obviously located in Dallas too. And Mark said no to all the ideas in the class. I sent him an email. I was like, hey, like, what do you think about this? And he's like, you guys are going to fail for these 10 reasons. I don't think it was exactly 10. I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot of reasons. We ultimately failed. And I sent him a note and was like, hey man, you were right. We didn't work out. He's like, okay, well, I'm looking to buy a business. Why don't you come run it with me? And that business, we went and checked it out. So I went to China, saw what they were doing with their manufacturing line. They were building these hoverboards. The one they built was called Hovertrax. So we were going to buy that parent company. They own the IP. And at the time, back in 2014, there was a lot of people suing each other around hoverboard IP, which sounds crazy. But these guys had the original patent, and we were going to buy it, buy the company. But after going to China, we decided that we could actually do it a lot better. So it was myself, another co-founder, and Mark, and we built Radical Transport. So we built our own balancing technology. We ultimately did not buy that company. That's kind of how we built that business and how I met Mark.
And if from the time before you worked with Mark Cuban to after, if there were 0 points of transformation or 100 points of transformation in terms of how you did things, like I just kept doing them the exact same, or like, whoa, the way that I play the game is 100% different. Like, how different did your operating model, ultimately the way you approach investing in business, like how much did it change by working with him?
Oh, it was completely transformed for sure. To be honest, I knew nothing about investing when I was offered the job to work with Mark at his family office. And so kind of just helped form everything that I know about investing. And what he really helped me do was think big, think really big. And this was somebody who had built $1 billion business and sold it. And so he knew how to think big. But what he also knew how to do was identify entrepreneurs who could do that too. And then more than thinking big was like, okay, is this someone that can actually execute on the strategy to reach that goal? And so just like literally every single step on the way to get there was like informed by Mark.
Yeah. And what are the ways that you try to ask yourself, am I thinking big? Am I thinking big enough, and push it? Like, what does that look like now for you?
Now I've got to rein myself in. Thinking too big can be a problem sometimes, especially in what we invest in. But yeah. So it was more like, if somebody has like a widget that can do X, like that's great. A lot of the Shark Tank companies, for example, those are great businesses. They solve real problems. But a lot of them have a ceiling into how big the market is, or how much sales they can actually get. And so we tend to look for things, like when I was working for Mark, I was on all the non-Shark Tank investments. So we were tending to look for things that had much higher caps to their upside, or theoretically no cap, which would be like an energy company or something like that.
Okay. Got it. And along the way, you went back and got an MBA, right?
I did.
When did that fit into your journey and the steps?
Yeah. So I worked for Mark for about 5 years. I knew that this is really any family office. There's kind of just, you reach a ceiling in terms of your growth. And I wanted to keep being an investor. I wanted to kind of make some investment decisions. So I knew that I didn't have the kind of finance skill set that one might need in that role. And I still go back and forth on whether or not you need that skill set. I can't tell you I'm using it every day in my career, but what I really used it for was building a network of other investors, and specifically in the area that I wanted to live. So worked for Mark in Dallas, and that was great. We learned a ton, really grew together. And then he let me work remotely in Atlanta for a while, building up to the MBA, and then afterwards as well. And I wanted to solve my own problem, which was like, I want to be an investor in Atlanta. I couldn't start my company in Atlanta because the capital wasn't here to fund my type of business, which was a consumer hardware business. And so I knew that if I was going to be an investor, I also wanted to do it at home. And so going to Emory was a way to get my now wife and I back home, because she was living in Dallas with me as well. And also to build a network. So Emory is fantastic for that. A lot of great Emory alums in the investing community here in Atlanta, and really opened the doors to me kind of like building our business here. People are very generous with their time for students. And I really took advantage of that.
You did full-time MBA?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
2-year program.
How has that been trying to walk that path in Atlanta? When we initially got connected and I was kind of like piecing together the steps you had taken, like immediately I had a story pop in my mind that like, oh, that probably feels like it was tough. I wonder how he decided to go to Emory compared to some of the other options for business school that maybe would have more well-trodden paths into, big investment plays. Have you felt like fish out of water at times? Has it felt like, oh, this is growing in Atlanta, I can really do what I want to do here? Are you making big sacrifices to be here that wouldn't be true if you were in other cities? Like how's that going?
Would it be easier in San Francisco? Probably. Yeah. But that's kind of brings us back to the whole athletic thing. Like I'm not here to do easy things. And like Atlanta is growing. The tech ecosystem is growing here. And I want to be a part of it growing and want to be one of the reasons it grows. So yeah, I'm the only partner here though, of my firm. The other one is in San Francisco, and then we have a third partner in Philadelphia. What we invest in is also not typical to Atlanta. So Atlanta still likes, software investing. It's getting better in terms of people being open to hardware, things that might be a little bit more CapEx heavy. And we tend to focus more on like frontier or deep tech. That does include software investing on a number of occasions, but a lot of what we do involves hardware. So I'm happy to be here and supporting founders who want to build that type of company in Atlanta. What
was the journey from? Did you have a stop between school and opening your own shop?
I did.
Where was that?
At the Boston Consulting Group. Okay. So I was in the digital ventures practice.
Between B school and? Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Building startups for corporate clients.
Okay. Yep. Got it. And when did you know I'm going to go out and do my own thing, raise my fund, pursue the venture route?
That it's kind of a funny story because I went to business school to become a better investor. And when I was there, I was actually thinking, well, am I ready to be an investor or do I want to go build another business? And so I thought really long and hard about what that would be and who I could do that with. And it ultimately led me to BCG because it was neither. It was not investing. It also was not entrepreneurship, but it was like right in the middle. It was kind of mercenary for hire CEO type role where you would build the business, get a great salary, then you kind of replace yourself and hire the team to go continue building it. And corporate client partner through that. It was a separate entity that we were building. But yeah, so did that for about a year all in.
Would you start those businesses from scratch or they have the nascent concept and you take it to kind of marketization?
We would start from scratch. Yeah. So we would,
funded by the corporate partner.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yep. We would go into their business and just talk to people and figure out what the pain points were. And then we would decide with the client, hey, like, is there a business here? Could we build like a product or tool to fix this problem? And if we could, would other companies pay for it too? And so from there, we would kind of like decide to build the business or not with the client.
Got it. And did that work for you? Did it not work for you?
I learned a ton. We were talking about the email strategy earlier. This was an even higher level of like professionalization that frankly I needed.
Sure.
But the challenge was, it was such a great job. I got a little bit too comfortable. And we were working long hours. Consulting isn't easy. But I just realized like I want upside. Like we're building these cool businesses, but the client gets all of the upside here. And they actually have a great culture where like I can actually go join those businesses if I want to. And anyone on our team could do that. And it was actually like great proof to the client, like, hey, like there's buy-in, they believe in this too. And that's why there was such good culture there. And if you wanted to later on, you could come back and there were a number of people that did that. It was great. But honestly, I just wanted to hunt for my food. I wanted to like drive decisions again, which was a common theme. Like that was the thing of working with the family office, which was fantastic. But like at the end of the day, like I'm not making any decisions. And so all of that kind of led me to like, okay, it's time to start something again. Mm-hmm. And that brings like the timing alignment with my other partners. And it was kind of perfectly aligned. One of my partners was ready to leave. He had since left Mark's family office and was at another family office that he helped institutionalize. And he was thinking about doing something else as well. And our third partner was at a startup and he was ready to leave as well. So we kind of like timing worked out really well.
Okay. Got it. And how did you all align on a thesis? And like, what is that thesis? What kind of stuff are y'all looking at?
The thesis we aligned on has certainly evolved since then. So we launched the fund in July of 2021, and it was a $30 million fund. We were focused on what we called human performance. So anything that's better for you, better for the environment. And that's kind of how we started. And what the types of companies we were looking at tended to be kind of in the health tech space, or maybe like human optimization, one of our early investments was in a company that was building like an at-home blood testing device using some kind of like silicon photonics technology. So even at the early stage, we were really looking for companies that had some sort of like technical differentiation. And so we started to, over time, just started to say like, hey, let's be more intentional about what we're actually looking for here and who we are. And so it's kind of like broadening, but it's also narrowing at the same time. Broadening to let's look for frontier tech companies. That's really what we've been looking at. Even our first investment, a company called Nix Biosensors, they're a wearable biometric device. That it was really within that same ethos, and so we just became more intentional about it.
Got it. And when you go from human performance and human optimization to frontier tech, one, can you define frontier tech? And then two, like, do you have to go back to investors and say, like, we're expanding the aperture here, or like kind of a different take? Like, what is that process like to evolve the types of things that you're looking at?
Sure. Yeah. So I would define frontier tech as trading market risk for technical risk. And that's not always true, but the way we kind of think about it is like, if you can solve fusion, for example, there's almost no like cap on the upside. So we do have a fusion investment, but we're a little bit more comfortable underwriting the technical side of investing versus trying to pick, which software company is going to win in a landscape of 50 other competitors. That's kind of how we think about it.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what's like the time horizon on a frontier tech investment?
It's funny you ask. There is a big conception that is conception a word? I don't even know. There's a lot of people.
If there's a misconception, there's got to be a conception.
There is. It's a commonly held belief that those investments take a long time. And just for context, the traditional life of a venture fund is 10 years, usually with an optional year or two addition at the end. So software investing, usually that fund is a 10-year life. We have the same life on our fund. And we analyzed all companies that went public in the last 15 years. And we looked at what's the percentage that are frontier tech, what's the percentage that are software, how much capital did they need? How long did it take them to go public? And on average, the frontier tech, what we defined as frontier tech companies, which would be like robotics, AI, anything that was like health tech, just given our thesis, or climate tech, those companies go public on average 13 months faster. So it does sound like it's going to take a long time. And some of those investments certainly will, like Fusion, for example. We know that one's probably going to take a while. How
and why is it that they end up going faster than the software companies? To your point, it feels counterintuitive. But like, why is it that they end up moving more quickly?
There's an interesting dynamic. So a lot of the software companies also raised more money. And part of the reason there is with software, you can buy growth. So you know what your customer acquisition cost is. So if you just put more money to it, you get more customers. But what that means is you also need more money to get more revenue.
Sure.
And so software companies that go public raise a lot of capital relative to hardware companies, because all they're really doing is building their technology. And then, like I said, we were trading like market risk for technical risk. So if you can kind of build this product, a lot of times the sales aren't as challenging. And so like their path to revenue could be easier at that point. Plus going public, that's, obviously a way to raise money. And so sometimes frontier tech companies go public before they actually have their product finished. Car companies are a great example of that, like the Rivians of the world. And so like, it's just another way to kind of raise money too.
Got it. And I'm still curious if you can say more about frontier tech. Like, can you say like the last maybe 3 or 5 things that you took a long look at, and like what were some of those that are promising and why? Sure.
So the last one we took a long look at was an investment we actually made in a company called Prolific Machines. So they're using optogenetics to grow meat and other pharmaceuticals. So what that means is...
Yeah, thanks. I don't know what that means.
They're using light to affect how genes are expressed in cell growth.
Okay.
And so why that's important is today there's a number of other cell cultivated meat companies. So companies that are growing chicken or beef without any animals involved. So that usually that's like a slurry of different amino acids and expensive inputs. We can control cell growth with light and not need some of those expensive inputs. So the end goal is to have a cheaper end product because electricity isn't too expensive yet. So we're looking at different applications of meat, pharmaceuticals that we could potentially grow, like biologics. That one's like pretty interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do a couple more and then I'll ask some follow-up questions.
One of them, company called Fleet Zero, which is battery electric cargo ships. So a way to kind of decarbonize shipping that has some really cool battery technology that they've developed and should be first ship hitting the water pretty soon.
Okay.
Yeah. You want another one?
Sure.
We could go all day.
Yeah, please. I got nothing to time.
I'll tell you one about that we have not invested in, but are taking a look at a local company called Croft Motors. So they're trying to build hydrogen combustion vehicles. So the challenge with hydrogen vehicles today is, one, how do you refill them? Because there's not like a hydrogen equivalent to a gas station everywhere. California has a couple of them. They're expensive and they're not ubiquitous, meaning it's pretty hard to you can't travel the whole state basically. So what's cool about Croft is they've got a technology that can put a hydrogen fueling station in your garage for a relatively small footprint. And their vehicles can get, because obviously we don't have hydrogen fueling stations here in Atlanta. Their vehicles can get 600 to 1,000 miles per fill. Plus they have these kind of like canisters that you would maybe see on like a Jeep type, like have gas cans on the back, the equivalent to that. And they're building outdoor vehicles. So kind of like a 4Runner equivalent or off-road truck type thing. So trying to bring hydrogen vehicles to market with combustion engines. A lot of times today, the fuel is hydrogen, but it's still an electric vehicle. Yeah. So they're taking another look at it in a different way, which is super cool, especially here in Atlanta.
Yeah, that is super interesting. How do you all underwrite the technical risk? Like practically, how do you come to a position of assessing, if it's not in your specific wheelhouse, if something can work or not? What's that process?
It's really hard, to be honest, especially something like prolific machines with optogenetics. Because there's not a lot of optogenetics experts in the world we can go talk to, which is what we normally do. So we'll, very similar to consulting, talk to experts through an expert network or our network, or other investors we really trust, and just get a consensus on like, hey, is this real or not? We'll look at the research ourselves, obviously, that's out there. But a lot of times, with prolific, for example, like you want something that's on the bounds of possibility, but isn't going to like break the laws of physics. So what that means is a lot of times traditional academics might not think something can work just because it's outside of the scope of maybe how they've been trained. So we like things that are right on the edge there. They're possible and probable, but maybe just like not everyone's thinking about.
Have you had things come your way that upon doing some due diligence, you're like, yeah, that's going to work, but it's like not far enough out? Like it's not, it doesn't break those laws of what's commonly accepted or maybe possible?
Yes, absolutely. And we also have the problem of like, hey, this is definitely going to exist in the future, but that future might be 20 years from now and not 10. And so like, it might just be too early.
What's an example of that?
There's a lot of examples. There was one example of they wanted to build a sunshade, which global warming, obviously a very big problem. We could try to decarbonize here on Earth. We could try to capture carbon, number of different things people are doing today. Or we could reduce the sun's intensity on Earth by building a huge shade in front of it. Whether or not that will work is there's a lot of research that suggests it could work. How do you really build it? So like,
do you think that will definitely exist?
I don't see why not. Yeah.
Wow.
But
so it's a when, not an if.
But the way they wanted to do it is the hard part. So they wanted to build fueling stations on the moon. which they're not the only people that want to do that. But in one of the byproducts of the fuel they wanted to make was this aluminum, and they wanted to build the sunshade out of aluminum because it's durable if it were to be hit by debris kind of thing. And then it's a very like low waste process as well. Well, that whole process of just getting enough aluminum to build the sunshade you need customers that are going to buy the fuel on the moon. And so now you're waiting for the space ecosystem to grow. It was very easily like a 20, 30 year type time horizon.
Yeah. Wow. It's hard to me to think about. I tend to be like a little bit all over the place. It's hard for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to be the 20, 30 year space project guy.
We're not those people.
Yeah. I mean, you seem to get to see a lot more things than that.
But you know, what's really interesting about that one though, is that was one of the early SpaceX employees that was leaving to go build it. And so it's like, how do we not back this guy? I mean, we can't, we need returns sooner than that. So like we couldn't, but like, he's a good bet to make. So yeah, that's another hard part is like sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, like we always want to like find the right founders. He was a great founder. Just building something that was a little too far out there.
Yeah. Is a guy like that normal, or is he like way out there? Like, what's it feel like talking to him? I mean, define normal, right?
Well, yeah, that's the problem is like normal people don't build $1 billion businesses. That's not like a normal thing to do. So yeah, they're all a little bit maybe like not normal. Like I don't know what to think about the word normal too, because like this is just an aside, but like now that I've got like a young daughter, like if she's not like quote unquote what she thinks of as normal, you know, like I don't know like if I want to use that word around her.
Where, you know, thinking about long-term tech and big bets, like where's your like optimism, pessimism radar or metric about where things are and where they're going?
I tend to be pretty optimistic.
Is that required in your line of work? Or maybe they're just correlated?
Our team has a good balance of optimism and pessimism. Okay. Yeah, I tend to be pretty optimistic. You know, I think like there's a lot of money that's ready to be invested into really big, bold ideas. I think like now's a great time to do that. So that's how we're looking at it, at least.
And then are you all trying to add value to the companies once you've invested?
We are, yeah.
In the production of their technology or the marketization of it, or both?
Both. Just given my background as a founder, if it tends to be something that's a little bit more like consumer hardware-y, like I mentioned, our company Nick's, I can get pretty involved with product development, just giving feedback, maybe being a beta tester. If it's not something that we can get like in the weeds with, we tend to be more helpful on either them raising capital or like business development. So introducing them to potential customers, things like that.
Going back to like what you're excited about, what you're optimistic about, what you're worried about potentially, like when you think about like human performance and the technology and where this is going, you know, I'm wearing a Whoop band that'll tell me how I slept last night and otherwise. I'm like, well, eventually this is in my brain, right? Like when you look at certain horizons, what are you excited about and how far away are they from like a human performance, technology, elevated health standpoint?
I think it's a really exciting time for that. And the reason is people are just becoming much more aware of the science and our health and our agency over our own health outside of traditional healthcare. The Andrew Huberman, Peter Attias of the world are like really helping there. I think where the opportunity for that and like human performance lies is like, what do we do with all of this? Like someone's got to help us. And speaking from experience there, like, you know, those types of doctors, the Peter Attias of the world, request tons and tons of blood work and you get all this data back. And I recently did one from a company called Function Health. So it was like 137 biomarkers. And you get all this data. I asked my own doctor for, to run some of these tests and he basically just said no.
After you had the data back or the tests that they then did?
But yeah, before I did these tests, had to do them on my own basically. And, the reason was like, oh, you just don't need it. And I think like, we're just so fixated on like sick care in this like healthcare economy that like, we're not thinking about like, well, how could I prevent getting things in the future? So our traditional healthcare didn't want to do these blood tests. So went and did them on my own, but then I get all this data back and I can't take them to my doctor because he doesn't care about it. It doesn't think it's super useful. I could go down a huge rabbit hole and try to figure out what all this stuff means and how things work together, but I didn't go to medical school. So I think there's like a really big opportunity for like, how can we optimize our own health? Like we have access to this data now, but what do we do with it? There's not a lot of doctors that know, to be completely honest. And I'm not trying to take a shot at doctors, so maybe we can cut that out if you think we should. But like they're just we just haven't been taught that way. Like the system isn't set up for preventative care, so I think there's a really big opportunity there. How do you pay for it as a consumer is a big question because it's not cheap and all these tests are out of pocket. But we have made some really big strides within like the healthcare system. For example, like food is medicine. That's becoming bigger, which is like you can have your food paid for if it's healthy food, and it has been shown to help reduce your risk of disease, for example. That's very limited today, and it's really just Medicaid patients. But I think that's going to keep growing.
So to like pull that together, it seems like the general trend that you would be excited about is everyone having access to lower cost, almost like diagnostic and testing that they can do within entities that can make it actionable for them. And then ideally you tie that towards better, healthier habits over time that lower your total cost of care, because you're preventing things that might be tough. And in the aggregate, you've just shifted a lot of the expenditure earlier in someone's healthcare, sick care life cycle, and you've lowered it because the stuff that's super expensive is the treatment, not the healthy food. Right. Is that right?
Exactly.
And so what are the dominoes that have to tip? Because that seems like a better way to live, right? And a better way to have a healthcare system than we are now. What are the major dominoes that have to fall for that? Is that a frontier tech problem, or is that I
think that's an incentives problem.
Yeah, incentives
like today, doctors are paid more for the high cost procedure, surgery, than they are to prevent the need for that surgery in the first place.
Yeah.
And not all surgeries can be prevented. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I think it's an incentives problem.
Okay. Do you want an implantation device in your wrist or brain? I always like the questions where I make you laugh at these, by the way.
I'm laughing because we've looked at a bunch of those.
I'm sure.
We've looked at one that is a subcutaneous device that's implanted in your forearm that can measure your biomarkers for 1,100 days. And send it to, a phone, and you can kind of monitor these things. So we've looked at those. They're currently being tested in pigs, so not quite ready for us yet. But do I want one? Yes and no. I think just going back to the health data I just got, that stresses me out more than not having it. Because the answer isn't there yet. It's now what do I do with all this stuff? Sure, I had some good biomarkers, some bad ones, but I'm not stressed out about the bad ones. I'm stressed out about now I have another thing on my to-do list on top of being a dad and a business owner and all these other things. So yeah, if it could make my life simpler, I would want one.
Okay. Do you think your daughter will have that in her lifetime? With what degree of certainty would you say, yes, our kids, by the time they're grown up, it will be more common than not that folks have an implant related to their health optimization in their body?
I think they'll exist. I don't know how ubiquitous they'll be maybe in the next 20 years, but they're definitely going to exist.
Okay. What are you most excited about and most worried about when you think about some of the emerging technologies?
I'm not worried about too much. I think the big worry is job displacement. That seems to be on a lot of people's minds. Just as an analog kind of story to that, when Adobe first came out, people thought designers and artists were going to be out of a job, and that it was just going to replace thousands and thousands of jobs. But that wasn't the case. It actually made them better at their jobs. They were very uniquely suited to use those types of tools. And so I tend to view the AI wave we're in similarly, that it's going to enhance a lot of jobs. In the future, there will be jobs that it can replace. I can't answer what those people will do instead. But I do think there's going to be a lot more opportunities than there will be net losses of jobs. So that would be like my main pessimism if I had one. I think maybe another pessimism is just the cost to get there. Because I do, like, as an investor, like, we're monitoring and investing in companies that we think are world changing. And this current like AI wave we're in is definitely world changing. Some people think it's going to replace everything. Some people think it's not going to do that much. I think it's somewhere in the middle probably. But it's going to cost a lot of money to get there. So that would be my only other pessimism, is like, there's a lot of shots on goal being taken. And how many of them will go in, I think is like a really big question. And then hopefully we're investing in the ones that make it into the net. But yeah, that would be a main pessimism. Optimism is like almost unbounded in my mind. I think there's so many cool things that it's going to enable. It's going to give people free time, frankly. And just make, I think output's going to be significantly higher for people and for companies, and probably hopefully for like GDP down the road.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Is there a particular one that you would point to as either maybe something that folks are worried about, but you're actually optimistic, or just a place that you're particularly excited about where you're like, man, when I think about this part of how the future is going to be like, I'm like, all right, we're heading somewhere really good.
Yeah. I think, just staying on the topic of AI for a second, I think a really interesting application is like coding. I think that's probably the first like killer use case that we're going to see. Like, I think like OpenAI is great. Like, I use their product every day. But I don't think they really know what the product is yet. They're trying a lot of things, and some are definitely going to work. Some are working. But I don't think that's like the end game for generative AI. And I think coding is a really, really awesome use case for it. One, the data is already structured. It's very easy to see. You can kind of see what different levels of the data look like. You can see like a single line of code. You can see programs. You can see how programs interact with each other. I think that's really interesting. And I'm paying a lot of attention there.
Got it. Okay. Could we do a few like lightning round style questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. These are going to vary. And I didn't give Nick a heads up on these, so these are just coming. Big training day. Then you're going to have a big meal. Favorite Atlanta meal to do that? What is it?
Oh, that is a hard one. So I used to live in Morningside, and right across the street from Grindhouse. And hot Atlanta day, been out in the sun for a long time. Greasy burger was always top of mind. That would be high on the list. I also think pizza, Antico, or I live in Brookhaven now, so Vero, one of those two.
Yeah, Grindhouse is incredible. +1 on that. What do you think happens to you when you die?
Funny enough, my wife was asking me yesterday, like, do I want to be buried or cremated? And I always have a startup example for everything, which is probably annoying to some people. But I was like, well, I want to be turned into a diamond. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, well, we just saw this startup that can, you can be cremated and then they can turn your ashes into a diamond. And she's like, you want me to wear you on my finger? I was like, I don't care what you do with the diamond. That was a little bit in jest. But I don't really know. I think, I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay. Do you want to live forever?
No.
Okay. Why not?
Like, I don't know. I almost wonder if it's like, if it's never going to end, if you can find the same joy in things, or does the joy come from like the fleetingness of the moment? I don't know.
Yeah, like the joy of these mid-30s that are just here for a hot second and then gone forever. We just got to enjoy them while we're still athletic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Book that you would really recommend folks check out, whether that's about triathlon, investing, frontier tech, anything else that you have really, really enjoyed that you would recommend people read?
Mindset by Carol Dweck is one of my favorites. I've read multiple times, and I always find something new in there. And that's one that I tend to recommend to people if I'm asked.
Why?
I think like I found myself in this pattern before, where you kind of just are fixed in your mindset, in my mindset, where it's like this is what I do. This is how I think about things. Like, this is my path. This is like what I'm going to be doing. And mindset really helps open, like it's about the growth mindset. That's what the book's about, and the difference between growth and fixed. And it just helps like reset, like, okay, actually I should be thinking about these things as opportunities, not as things I need to get through to get to the weekend, for example, or, but like really trying to find opportunity and think of myself as, more potential, limitless potential kind of thing. And just always being willing and able to keep growing in everything.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And then, is there a habit or a way of being that you see folks tending to have in modern culture, a way that we do things that you think isn't serving us well? And what would you replace that habit with, or that way of being?
That's a very good question. I mean, I feel like a pretty obvious answer is social media. In the question of like, what do you replace it with? That's a funny question, because social media replaced like idle time. And so it's not like it really replaced anything. It's grown from there. Obviously now it has become the thing that we do. But it started as something to do in between time. So like it was pre-Uber, but I'm in a taxi, and like, what am I going to do while I'm in this taxi? Well, I could scroll Facebook or scroll MySpace at the time. And it from there bloomed into this thing that we have now. So I don't know. I often think about like, if we look back 40, 50 years, like what's going to be the smoking of today? Is it social media? Is it alcohol? What is it? I don't know. But I feel like that's a front runner for sure.
What's your guess? What's the smoking of today?
Probably social media.
Yeah. A thing that was originally good for us, and then we realized like, oh wait, and we stopped.
It was well-intentioned. It really was in the beginning, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we still don't know what like using phones habitually is going to do to us. We're just like, sometimes feel like we're all running in this long experiment that's unfolding, which is kind of scary, but out of our hands at this point.
Yeah. If only there was a way to read the future.
Seems like you're trying.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah. Well, thanks for jamming with me today.
Of course, this was fun.
Good luck in the World Championships. We should do a round 2 at some point, and then just riff on long-term ideas. And you should tell me what's in or what's out. That would be great fun for me.
Yeah, I would love to.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's our show. Thanks, Nick, for the time. Makes me want to go out for a run, maybe a bike, not a swim yet. Maybe one day. Appreciate all of you all listening to Macon Atlanta. As always, if you got feedback, ideas, questions, people you want to see on the show, hit me up. Let me know. It's fun to do this together. I love all the input. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day and your week. You're doing great out there. Talk soon.